Aquariums and kids. Two things we care for that add interest and wonder to our worlds. The two don't always coexist without the odd mishap or disaster, but do they? How many times have you seen that in an online forum? Help, my wee ones spilt a whole can of food in the fish tank. What do? Maybe they've dropped a sweetie in for the fish to eat, a fizzy sweetie, or their favourite toys. Sometimes, well, there's a bit of a more significant incident that happens with children and fish tanks. So, I've come up with a few ideas, a few ways that we can prevent disaster occurring. First off, we'll look at the food, and it's as simple as keeping it out of their reach, isn't it? So this is the food I'm using most often at the moment, this dry food anyway, this Origin Aquatic Nutrition, and the packets I've got stay on top of my tall tank, so that should prevent the wee ones getting hold of it. Should, I say. Some of these human fry are ever so inventive. I did legitimately come home to that one day, but otherwise the rest of the foods, the dry foods that I use, I tend to keep in a tub with a nice firmly closing lid, and then it goes up into the cupboard of doom where the kids definitely can't get at it. It's not just food though we keep, is it? We've got chemicals and other equipment, and for that I've got a wee cupboard under the stairs which is guarded by one of these wonderful child locks. They're just fantastic. They're not particularly expensive, not considering the peace of mind they're going to give you and a safety element, and there's lots of different versions. So I picked this packet up off of Amazon. What was it, 8 for, I think it was even a tenner. They all work with the same kind of principle though, make it near enough impossible for a young child to figure out. Probably they'll not be strong enough to operate it, and if they ever did start messing about, you'd hear them and you've got a chance to react before they get in there. So maybe you keep all your fish equipment in the cupboard underneath the tank, in which case these work kind of well too. And with these particular ones, it's a little bit tricky to release it actually when it's not stuck to the tank, but there we go. You can see it just slides off the back rather than gripping the two sides, which means you can put it somewhere a little more discreet. And when you're standing up, you won't see that because it's underneath the ledge. You can use them for securing your lids as well. All you've got to do is put it in a place that's going to stop the human fry from opening the lid up. They're not going to be pretty. It's not going to be the ideal the ideal visual element that you want, but do you know what, if it's keeping your fish safe and your kids, it's going to be worth it, isn't it? Just peel the back off, stick them on, and away you go. The problem with these tanks while we're here is that the base is quite narrow and all the weight is at the top, so a sizable child running into them could possibly tip it over, or maybe they're reaching in behind trying to get at one of their toys they've dropped and it could tip forward. The way to eliminate that problem then is to get some metal brackets secured to a solid piece of your wall and then to your cabinet. It should eliminate the chance of it being pushed forward or knocked into and falling over. A smaller child like a toddler could run into the rough edges on a tank and get a sore face or a nasty bump. I've seen that a couple of times. But nowadays you can get these silicone strips, sticky silicone strips that you can run along those edges, and it cushions the impact. It means they don't hurt themselves when they do it. Not as much as they could anyway, and they're virtually invisible. They are very good. Maybe we just need to keep the human fry away from our tanks, full stop. This was one of my previous setups, and as you can see, you got the big tank at the bottom and then smaller tanks underneath. Very accessible to exploring minds and eyes and fingers and all that. If you notice, the panel on the left is covered, and for that I use this kind of, I don't even know what it's made of, it's kind of a plasticky corrugated sheeting. I just made a few panels of it and then ran some Velcro along two of the edges, and the other side of the Velcro attached to the tank stand. It meant that I could cover the tanks over when I didn't want people to see them or interfere with them, but it wasn't ideal if I'm honest. It wasn't perfect. When I was lucky enough to be looking at buying a new tank setup then, I still wanted to do the same thing. I still wanted to have tanks underneath the main tank. And one of the deciding factors on this dual Rio was the cabinet. Look, there's no handles. There's nothing for little fingers to grip and pull open. Actually works on a spring system. You actually have to push the door at roughly the right spot in order to get it to ping out, which is less obvious to little people. None of them have figured it out so far anyway. Pretty happy with that. Am I calling it good there then? No, I most certainly am not. I've also added magnetic locks. As you can see, you've got to hold the magnet at exactly the right place for it to release the catch. If you don't do that, it doesn't become free from another part that you install, the stopper there, which means that the spring door won't open either. Genius. There's loads of versions of these child locks. You can use them for kitchen cupboards, medicine cupboards, whatever, but they also work magic for aquarium doors. Just got to make sure you don't lose your magnet, or even worse, lock it inside the cupboard, which I did do once. You tend to get a spare anyway, so generally you're alright. Behind this particular centre door is where I keep all my live cultures. Really don't want the human fry getting involved in that. I don't think Mrs. DKF would be too impressed if one of them comes through covered in grindle worms. I'm also able to keep all the electrics for these tanks in that cupboard there as well. And keeping human fry away from electrics sounds like a sensible plan to me. My last suggestion then is just spending time with the kids. Kill the curiosity with knowledge and experience. Teach them how much to feed the fish and when to feed the fish. Tell them a fish's eye is as big as its belly, so you only need a small amount. Make a routine of it even. If there's one thing I've found kids don't really like is thinking they've got a job to do. But if you make a routine of it, they learn, they develop, they grow. They're going to ask more questions. You're going to feel their wonder, and they're going to become amazing fish keepers themselves one day. Hey, if they learn how to do things right, we don't have to worry so much about them getting into trouble by getting things wrong.